Now, I am Nifemi Oguntoye. French President Emmanuel Macron says it's key for Europe's security to defeat Russia and Ukraine and made urgent pleas for more weapons from Kyiv. He was speaking in Paris, where he said European leaders had agreed to set up a coalition to give Ukraine medium and long-range missiles and bombs. This comes as Russian troops made recent gains in Ukraine, which faces big arms shortages. We have details in this report.
2 years into Russia's invasion, and Ukrainians say they will not give up. This comes as Kyiv is critically dependent on modern armory supplies from its Western allies, particularly the US, to be able to continue fighting Russia. The approval of a much-needed $95 billion US aid package, including $61 billion for Ukraine, faces an uphill battle in the House of Representatives. And since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, Denmark has sent military support to the country. Among these, Caesar artillery systems have been donated to the Ukrainian front. 19 pieces have been sent towards the war line. The war, for the 2 years it has now lasted, has moved in waves, with Russia appearing to start with the upper hand, then to lose it, and now seeming to regain it. Prior to the February the 24th, 2022 invasion, Russia and pro-Russian forces had occupied the Crimean Peninsula and a large swathe of eastern Ukraine since 2014. And a few weeks into the war of invasion in 2022, the Russian-controlled area had grown to a quarter of Ukraine's total territory. Over the next year, Russia and Ukraine alternately went on the offensive, though without any significant frontline territorial gains. This year, it is the Russians who have run away with the biggest victory, when last weekend they captured the strategically important town of Avdiivka near the Russian-controlled metropolis of Donetsk. And right now, there are intense battles along the entire front line, with the Russians on the offensive and the Ukrainians on the defensive. Talking battles for Lastochikny in Avdiivka's direction, Ukrainian units have held back Russian invaders on the western outskirts of the settlement. This was announced in the Operational Strategic Group of Troops Tavria. The nearest villages of Semenivka and Olivka are also under constant fire from Russian artillery.
And Sweden has cleared its final obstacle to joining NATO after Hungary's parliament voted to ratify the bid. The Nordic nation applied to join the defense alliance after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Every member must approve a new joiner, and Hungary had delayed, accusing Sweden of being hostile to it. Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson said it was a historic day and a big step for Sweden to abandon 200 years of neutrality. NATO Security General Jens Stoltenberg also added that the Hungarian decision made the alliance stronger and safer. The parliament's approval must now be signed by the president, after which a formal invitation is sent to Sweden to join the 31-member group. The process usually lasts a few days. Joining me now is global affairs analyst Ejike Okpa to speak more on the Russia-Ukraine war and the current developments. Mr. Okpa, thank you for joining us on the war. Now, let's begin with a review of the Ukraine-Russian war in 2 years. Ukraine was hit by a wave of Russian strikes overnight on the day marking 2 years anniversary of the conflict. And there are signs of the war actually turning in Moscow's favor. But we also have seen that Russia hasn't been able to capture Kyiv and take control of the Ukrainian government 2 years after. What do you make of the dynamics of this war thus far?
Thank you for having me. War has no ending except the two parties involved in it come to terms and want to end it. The Ukrainians are able to stay as long as they have stayed in this war because of the U.S. support and NATO. But you could see, things are beginning to wane for them because the Americans are not giving them 100% support. the bill to give them additional resources is tied up in Congress because, in U.S. we have issues with the southern border. And then, the Republicans are demanding that for the president to do something for Ukraine, we have to do something for our own open border. So that has been the slowdown, and that has taken, the wind out of Ukraine. But, Russia sees these things. Russia is emboldened because, the American support is not coming as it used to be. And so they're going to do what? They're going to take advantage of that loophole. And then Ukraine is scrambling. None of the NATO countries has the resources that America has, to back their neighbor. So that's what's going on. And I'm hoping that, this war doesn't last another 2 years.
Talking about foreign support, we've seen foreign leaders travel all the way to Ukraine to show solidarity on the anniversary. And G7 leaders are also saying they remain committed to supporting Ukraine. But like you said, we've seen some resistance to support coming from the U.S. and the EU in the preceding year. How long more can Ukraine count on this global support?
Well, again, it's a case of, you take anybody for instance, you want to go fight, but, you are hoping that your neighbor or some friends will come. If you don't have the strength yourself, how long can you sustain your own desire to defend yourself? So, yeah, the G7 will go, what is this G7, known for? They go and make promises, and they're very wishful, but they don't have anything to back it. So Ukraine has to look itself in the face and look at its own resources and said, how long can we sustain this without anybody coming to our help? America has been their biggest supporter, giving them the arms. I'm not giving them some of the type of arms that they want. So, Russia is out there. Russia is also sustaining some losses, but, Russia is the big elephant in the neighborhood. And so maybe Russia is just waiting as America gets into presidential election. And, Biden is going to be more concerned about winning, then, Russia might just step in and do more damage to Ukraine. So all of these geopolitics, and the personalities behind them, they're all very calculating. They're all trying to, inflict the biggest damage on somebody else. Because, if America is not coming forth with what they want to do for Ukraine, then Ukraine is going to be weakened. And then, of course,
I hear you clearly. There's a global security dimension to all of this as well. Finland and Sweden applied to join NATO after the Russian invasion in 2022. Finland joined sometime in April last year. The ratification process for Sweden is now being finalized. But we're also hearing that Bosnia and Herzegovina and Georgia formally informed NATO of their membership aspirations, same as Kosovo. How much impact has this conflict had on military alliance in Europe, and by extension, war security?
Well, you go back to the World War I and the World War II, it has always been an European conflict. But then, because, the Western world have control over the rest of the world, everybody else is dragged into it. All the NATO members, it's just like if the sum of the parts are weak, the whole ain't going to get its strength. So all these other countries you have mentioned that have expressed interest, they are doing it because they are afraid that if Russia succeeds in taking over Ukraine or inflicting more damage, who is likely to be next? So they all try to congregate and aggregate their resources. But again, some of the parts are weak. And so they all try to put up a front, and then Putin is just watching them. Because, Putin is the calculated guy. When this started, he stood up to America, stood up to everybody, and he seems to be getting, even though he sustained some losses. There are 40 to 50,000 Russians have died in this war. But he's willing to do it because he's not going to die. He's in a secured environment. So again, it's a matter of the neighbors, the two people next to each other. Why don't you guys come to terms? What are we fighting for? Of course, part of going to war is about ego. It's about ego of the people that drag you into it, and then everybody else takes a side. So it's very fortunate.
Talking about ego, Mr. Okpa, some would even say that there are more countries fighting this war outside Ukraine and Russia. When you hear French president saying it is key for Europe's security to defeat Russia in Ukraine. Do you foresee that the dynamics will change in such a way that we'll begin to see foreign soldiers set foot and other countries get directly involved?
Well, that's the fear. If, for instance, America has said that they will send arms, but not American soldiers, what they call boots on the ground, they're not going to do that. Because once you do that, what is going to do? He's going to just get excited and start doing whatever. He may eventually get subdued, but he would have inflicted more damage. France, come on, what's the military might of France? They probably, people like France and England, maybe they go to Africa and flex their muscle. But on a global international, their military has no resources. Their military has no fighting strategies. They may have the things they have for weak countries, but when push comes to shove, you're not going to depend on French soldiers to do anything for you. Since after the end of the war, they've been weakened, just like Germany, they've been weakened. The only reasonable force in Europe is, what is their name? UK. But then you look at the UK soldiers, what conflict have they successfully taken care of since the end of the World War? So Russia is still the biggest military fear in Europe, and they know it. Because, the people that lead Russia, they have a different kind of mindset, and they're willing to do things that other people are not going to do. So America becomes, the only nation they're going to go to under this NATO alliance. And it was America that created NATO. And then, you see what Trump is saying, that you NATO members, you need to start paying to defend yourself. But more than 75 years they've been in existence and relied on somebody else to do it. They didn't think this time will come when they have to do something for themselves. So maybe after, as Russia is doing these things, they're going to go back to the drawing board and say, what, we need to be for our own defense budget and be able to take care of ourselves instead of relying on America. So that's what is going on. But, don't put weight on France, don't put weight on the English soldiers. I mean, come on, they're just people that dress very well and walk around in the barracks, but they ain't got no fighting force.
2 years after Zelensky saying that 1,000 troops have been killed, who knows what happened next? That's our time. Global